This lesson is brought to you by the Gauteng Department of Education in collaboration with Saipono Discovery Center. Today we look into a main topic we call the business role, which is assessed in your paper 2, and the subtopic we look into is ethics and professionalism. This is where we will be focusing on how a business can behave ethically and how can the employees of a business then be guided on how to behave in a professional manner. Now, objectives. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to define or elaborate on the meaning of ethical behavior. You should further be able to give practical examples of ethical and unethical behavior, then look into defining or elaborating on the meaning of professional behavior, thereafter give practical examples of what is professional behavior, to say what is expected of an employee, and unprofessional behavior, then talking to what the employee should not do because it would be considered to be unprofessional in the business. And then you'll also look into outlining the differences or distinguishing or differentiating between ethical and professional behavior. Thereafter, you should be in a position to explain how businesses can apply the King Code principles, which we consider to be transparency, accountability, and responsibility for good corporate governance to improve the ethical business conduct of the business. As we continue, another objective we should be able to understand at the end of this lesson is the idea of suggesting or being in a position to recommend ways in which professional, responsible, ethical, and effective business practices should be conducted. Thereafter, you should be in a position to identify the following types of unethical business practices from the given scenario statement. So this is to say we are going to look into unethical business practices, and we are going to only look into 3. The following will be considered when we are looking into unethical business practices. We will look into tax evasion. We will also look into unfair advertising, and then thereafter we are going to look into pricing of goods in rural areas, and then you should be able to explain how those types of unethical business practices will pose a challenge to the business, and also be in a position to recommend strategies. And then we'll also look into identifying types of unprofessional business practices from a given scenario or statement, and thereafter explain how they pose a challenge. And then the last part will be recommending strategies to deal with the unethical business practices, thereafter looking into how to deal with unprofessional business practices. Now, terminology that is key for this lesson. We need to be in a position to understand what does the term business ethics mean. Business ethics refers to ideas about what is morally correct or not applied in a business situation. So this is to say, this is what is morally correct to apply in a business. This is the actions that a business should be engaging in to be considered to be doing the right actions and transactions. Ethical behavior is acting in ways consistent with what the society and individual things are good values. And then when you are looking into that, it talks to the society to say, what is the society valuing? So these are aspects that the society will value, to say these are the correct values that the business should be engaging into, like fair advertising, like not polluting the environment. All those are considered to be morally correct, and the society believes that those are good values, because a business that does not pollute, a business that does not engage in illegal business practices, is considered to be in its best behavior, which we then call an ethical behavior. And then business practice, what do we mean by that? A procedure or a rule employed or used or followed by a business in the pursuit of its objective. Business procedures are ways in which the business do their activities. So those ways or those activities that the business use to make profit should be ethical. They should not harm the community. Then Professionalism describes the internationally accepted standards or expectations that the society has of people's conduct and levels of competency in the workplace. So these are internationally allowed standards to say, as a worker in the workplace, as an employee in the workplace, this is internationally accepted or expected to any worker by the society, especially by the individuals in that particular profession. Now let's start with the first aspect. We will then define the meaning of ethical behavior and also look into the meaning of professional behavior. Let's start with the meaning of ethical behavior. It refers to acting in ways consistent with what the society and individual think are good values. Remember that the business is selling their product to the communities, and when communities combined, we consider those communities to be a society. So therefore, it means the business in its procedure of trying to sell products or services to the community or society, they need to ensure that they sell in line with what the society believes is or are good values. And then furthermore, ethical behavior is expected from every employee in the business, because sometimes the business might have procedures, but the employees might not follow the procedures and try to then misbehave, which will then lead to the business being considered to be an unethical business, because they will then be against the good values that the society expects from the particular business. It means that these are the highest legal and moral standards which are held when dealing with stakeholders. And in this case, the most important stakeholders will then become the society, because the society refers to the what now? The community. And the community will then be considered to be the customers of the business. So the business should ensure that they hold the highest and moral standards which are upheld when dealing with stakeholders. So when dealing with customers, the business should be ethical. That's why we are talking about the highest legal and moral standards. So the business should ensure that it does what is right and what the society considers to be right. Then, these are the examples then of what are we really looking into when we are saying ethical behavior, when we are saying good values that are valued by the society, the people, or the community. The community will always believe that an ethical business practice is when a business uses fair advertising. Another one is that the business or the community will believe that an ethical business practice, it has nothing to do with using child labor. So, so the business should not use children or use child labor. And child labor would mean a business would be employing a child age 15 or a child under the age of 16. So another aspect that is considered to be a ethical business practice is when treating all employees equally, like paying them equal wages and salaries, and also paying them fair wages is also considered to be an ethical business practice, together with operating within the law. Remember, you were introduced in the first chapter of grade 12 to legislations. So if a business then complies, if the business complies with all the legislations, then that business is considered to be operating within the law. Remember, some of the legislations that we can really consider to be important is your Basic Conditions of Employment Act, which talks about the number of hours that employees should be working under, and it also outlines some of the conditions like the leave conditions and the types of leaves that should be applicable to all workers. So that would then be making a business that complies with all all the legislations to be operating within the law, and which will then help the business to be engaging in ethical business practices, which are practices that I said the society, which is the society or customers, which is the community or customers, are thinking are good values. And remember that the society also, the employees come from the society, the employees of the business will come from the community. Hence, it is important for the business to operate within the law. And the business deals should be conducted in an open way, openly so that everyone can see how the business makes money. And then when you look into unethical business practices, these are practices that the business should try to avoid at all costs. For instance, a business can do what we call unfair advertising. Unfair advertising can be a situation whereby a business is trying maybe to sell a second-hand product as a brand new product. That is unfair advertising. Another aspect of unethical business practice, or an example of unethical business practice, could be pricing of goods in rural areas. So when a business then increases or inflates prices to rural areas or in remote areas, that is considered again to be an unethical business practice. And then also we know that in South Africa businesses have to pay tax, or then some businesses do what we call tax evasion by falsifying their financial statement so that they can pay less tax, which then is considered to be an unethical business practice. So when you look into that, we are going to focus on unfair advertising, pricing of goods in rural areas, and we are also going to look into taxation or tax evasion. And then another unethical business practice is paying employees unfair wages and also disobeying the law and using bribery to gain business deals, which is now considered to be an example of unethical business practices. Then, meaning of professional behavior. It refers to what is right or wrong or acceptable in a business. It focuses on the worker. It focuses on the worker's behavior. Hence, we say it focuses on what? It outlines a set of standards of expected behavior. To say as a worker, what is the set of expected behavior within the business? How should you behave when you are within the business? In a private hospital, then we consider that to be a private business. Then you look into a nurse and a doctor. There are set of standards of expected behavior for a nurse or each and every worker in their different profession. But what is key again is to understand that a profession is from a career perspective. Hence, now we are saying professional, and it focuses on the worker, on the worker's behavior within the business. Hence, we say this is a set of standards of expected behavior, and it is what is wrong or right in a business, because a worker will be operating within a business. Hence, we are saying professional behavior is then applicable in a business. Then, as we move on, applying a code of conduct of professional or a business. A business will therefore develop a code of conduct which will then guide employees on how to behave inside a business. Inside a business. So applying a code of conduct of a profession or a business, which will then guide, as I said, it will guide the employees on how to behave inside a business. Examples of professional behavior can be an employee who uses good use of work time, an employee who treating all people the same, an employee who uses polite language to colleagues, and an employee who keeps clients' details confidential. And then when we look into unprofessional business practices, it looks into abuse of work time. So an employee who would abuse work time is an employee maybe who would be logging into their social medias while they are supposed to be performing their duties and responsibilities. And then another employee who would then be considered to be unprofessional is an employee who would be engaging in sexual harassment, meaning abusing other employees in maybe trying to get into the maybe when there's a promotion in the workplace, then a manager says you can get the promotion if you agree to sleep with me. That is considered to be sexual harassment, and it is unprofessional. Hence, it focuses on what? The worker, because a business can never do sexual harassment, but a worker inside a business can do sexual harassment. And then unauthorized use of business resources is also considered to be the other unprofessional business practice. And then an employee who's using rude or impolite language is also considered to be unprofessional. And then let's look into the differences between ethical and professional behavior. What is ethical behavior and how does it differ to a professional behavior? The difference there is that when we look into ethical behavior, let's conclude and understand that ethical behavior focuses on how the business will be behaving. Why are we saying it focuses on how the business will be behaving? Because it refers to the principle of what is right and wrong or wrong in the society. But remember, a business behavior here is important because the society is where we then look into the idea that the society refers to customers. Meaning the customers will be coming from the society. Hence we say this is what is wrong or right in the society. So this is what the business should be thinking, to say, as I sell to these customers, I have to consider some of the things to be right, and there's some of the things that the customers will think they are wrong. So I should do away with those aspects that are considered to be the wrong things. Then when you look into professional behavior, it refers to what is right or wrong in a business. So therefore, it talks about guiding what now? It talks about guiding the worker inside the workplace. Hence we say now, it conforms to a set of values that are morally accepted. So then the business will have to conform. The business will have to comply, because another word or a synonym to conform can be comply. So the business has to comply to a set of values that are morally accepted by the society. So the business will then have to, I said another word for conform, would have to comply. And remember, this has to do with following what? Following rules. So the business has to follow some rules that are set of values, that are values that are morally accepted by the society. And then when you look into professional behavior, these are set of standards of expected behavior. Set of standards of expected behavior. To say, as a worker, these are the standards of behavior. Use proper language. Don't abuse work time. Do not do sexual harassment. That is what is expected from your behavior as a worker. Then, forms part of code of conduct to guide employees to act ethically. When the business develops their what now? Code of conduct, which guides employees on how to behave, they will then consider the ethics, the morally accepted principles in the society. But when we look into professional behavior, a worker then has to apply or use a code of conduct of a profession or of a business, so that they know that when they behave, they are behaving ethically in line with what the society think are good values. Hence we say a code of conduct should be applied by the worker. But when we look into ethical behavior, the values that the community or society will be thinking they are correct values should be part of what? The code of conduct to guide employees. So the business will then have to develop that and ensure that employees are guided to behave ethically. And then workers will have to then apply or use. They have to apply or use the code of conduct of a profession or of a business. So in this case, we'll look into the business to say the business will use, or the employee will use the code of conduct of a business in order to behave professionally. But the business will then think about the society in order to be doing ethical behavior. Then we look into the application of King Code principles for good corporate governance. For good corporate what? Governance. We are having three. One is transparency. Then we also have accountability together with responsibility. So when we look into transparency, accountability, and responsibilities, these are King Code principles. And they are considered to be King Code principles for good corporate. Meaning, another word for corporate can be what? Business. So when we look into governance, we are looking into how the business can be controlled. So these are good ways to do what? To control the business. One way is the business should be transparent, the business should be accountable, and the business should show responsibility. Let's see how. Now, what is key is for you to understand the following. When we are looking into transparency and governance, it talks to the idea of the business being open. But let us now understand the following. In a company has shareholders. Shareholders contribute capital. Capital is the money used to start a business. Then it moves toward inside that company on a day-to-day basis. The company will have directors. Thereafter, we can then consider the following. There will be top, there will be middle inside the business, and then there will be low management. Now, this is the actual business, and the actual business is funded by shareholders. But what we should think about is to say shareholders here, they are not coming to the business on a day-to-day basis, and sometimes they never even come and show up at all. So it means these are people who contributed money, but they don't come to this business to check their operations. Hence, now we talk about the King Code principles of good corporate governance to control and govern the business in the best way. To do it, the business would then have to use what? Transparency. And what does that mean? It means decisions or actions must be clear to all stakeholders. Why? Because there is some stakeholders who are not there, like the what? Shareholders. So whatever decision that is taken here, the shareholders must know about the decision or they must be communicated to by the what? Directors. So hence we are saying transparency should be there on what is happening on the company on the day-to-day basis. And then staffing and other processes should be open and transparent. Then another aspect is that employees or shareholders should be aware of the employment policies of the business. Furthermore, auditing and other reports must be accurate and available for shareholders. So it talks to the diagram I had for you to say with everything that happens, we are saying transparency because whatever that happens inside the business in the absence of these shareholders, because they are important stakeholders and they have invested money into the business, information about what is happening should be open and transparent to them. Hence we are saying auditing and other reports must be accurate and available. And remember, with auditing we are talking about the process of checking the financial statements or the financial documents of the business, and that information should be accurate and should be available to the shareholders. Then regular audits should be done to determine the effectiveness of the business. Then that would then consider the business, or those actions will then make a business to be transparent. And when the business is transparent, then that business is applying the King Code principle for good corporate governance. Then let us look into now again accountability, which is another which is another what now king code principle for good corporate governance. You had the structure. I showed you shareholders are not in a company every day, and they never come at all in some instances. So how will accountability as a king code principle help the business to then be controlled in a proper way, even if the shareholders who have contributed money as investors are not there? Accountability will therefore mean there must be regular communication between management and stakeholders. Again, it talks to the diagram to say board of directors. To say directors should communicate with the stakeholders, and the most important stakeholder in this case becomes what? The shareholder. Then, as we proceed, businesses should be accountable and responsible for their decision and actions. The directors should be responsible because they are the ones who run the business on a day-to-day basis. And then the company should appoint internal and external auditors to audit financial statements. So that is another way. And then the board should ensure that the company's ethics are effectively implemented. Who is the board? The board is the directors, because they are there on a daily basis. They are the eyes, they are the ears, and the nose and the mouth for the company. So the board should ensure that company's ethics are effectively implemented to ensure that everything is managed in a proper way. Then responsibility. What are we talking about there? The business or the board should develop and implement programs that should be aimed at protecting the community in which they operate. This is to show that the business is responsible for the immediate community, hence we call it responsibility. And then the board or the business should develop remedial programs to protect the environment, for example, such as creating a CSI project, which is a corporate social investment, and this is to say the business will be actively committing money in a pollution program such as reducing air and water pollution. So that would be considered to be responsibility. But look, let us look into ways in which a business can ensure professional, responsible, ethical, and effective business practices and how they should be conducted. For instance, the business decisions and actions must be clear or transparent to all stakeholders. I explained the relationship clearly to say the directors will run the company every day, but the investor, which is the shareholder, they are not there. Therefore, they need to be transparent with the stakeholders or shareholders. And then businesses should be accountable or responsible for their actions, and actions together with patent rights. So the business will have to be responsible for whatever decision they have taken. The business will thereafter have to hire honest and trustworthy accountants and financial officers with good credentials. Why is this corporate governance there? It's because they are aware that companies are run by people who did not invest. So meaning investors have taken the risk to give someone money to run the business on their behalf. Are we clear? So that is to say, if the businesses then are running using the investors' money and the investors who are not there, the businesses would then have to hire an honest what now? And a trustworthy accountant who will make sure that the financial documents of that particular business are accurate. And then as we move on, regular or timers payment of tax should be made. And then the business should also draw up a code of ethics or of conduct. Then ongoing development and training for all employees should also take place to show that the business is professional, responsible, ethical, and effective in its business practices. And the last part is that the mission statements should include values of equality and respect. Then let us look into the types of unethical business practices. We have three that we focus on thoroughly: unfair advertising, the other one is pricing of goods in rural areas, and tax evasion. So let us look into the examples of each. The first one is unfair advertising. For example, giving goods false labeling is considered to be unfair advertising, and also selling second-hand goods as new goods is considered to be unfair advertising. And then we then look into this picture. This is unfair advertising. This is what you see here, then advert. As advertised, the burger looks very nice. But what you get in reality, unfortunately, is different from what you saw on the advert. So this can also be considered to be unfair advertising, because somewhere, somehow, you were attracted by this advert, which has a burger or a patty together with the cheese and the lettuce looking very fresh, and the sauce and the tomato there looking very, very nice. But when you look into this one now, this is a problem. So a customer can then complain to say, this is not what I expected. I expected something similar to what is on the advert. Let us see what challenges are posed by unfair advertising in the workplace. 1. Unfair advertising could be harmful to customers. As you saw that burger doesn't look convincing. It doesn't look like you can even eat, because it doesn't look very good. So it might be harmful to consumers. And then another one is that the use of false or unfair advertising statements in advertising may lead to what? Misinterpretation of the concerned product, which may have a negative effect on the consumer. So sometimes the misleading advertisements may be about the features of a product and what the product can do. It can also have a negative impact on the customer, because the customer will buy with a certain intention or expectation. And then businesses can make unwise advertising choices when they are under pressure to increase their profits. So this is to say, now some businesses will then be under pressure, some businesses will be not winning customers, so they might make decisions that might lead to unfair advertising as a way to try to attract customers. And then some advertisements might be regarded to be discriminatory because they exclude or target some sections of the population, which will then be considered to be unfair, because South Africa is a democratic country. Then, as we move on, unfair advertising strategies to deal with unfair advertising in the workplace, for instance, include consumers must report unfair advertisements to the Advertising Standard Authority. So this is one way in which a consumer can deal with unfair advertising. And then businesses should be encouraged to keep their advertising fair and in line with the Constitution. And then another aspect would then be pricing of goods in rural areas. For example, this is when a business inflates price. What is to inflate is to increase prices of goods. And then another one is charging higher for goods of inferior quality in the rural areas, because now people in the rural areas do not have some of the opportunities like those who are in the other areas or urban areas. So that can be considered to be an unethical business practice. Let's look into the challenges here. Challenges posed by pricing of goods in the rural areas as an unethical business practice is that some businesses in the rural areas will exploit customers by adding much more than necessary in their price. That's one. And then another aspect then would be considered to be some customers or consumers in the rural areas have little economic and are vulnerable to exploitation. And then businesses may form monopolies in rural areas and increase prices unitarily, making it now an issue of having that one price. So all businesses, maybe there are 5 businesses in the rural areas, and they will all be selling their products using the same price, because they know that obviously the rural communities, as they go and try to buy a product, they will not go anywhere, but they'll only have those businesses as their businesses. And then what is now the strategy for pricing of goods in rural areas? Most businesses in the rural areas would be complaining about the transportation cost. So the strategy would be then those businesses should work with the supplier to share the delivery cost to remote rural areas. That's one. And then businesses can buy in bulk to get a discount to avoid charging higher prices. And then the business should charge fair or market-related prices for goods and services, meaning market related in terms of South Africa as a whole, not because their business is operating in rural areas, then they decide to charge more. The business should avoid unethical business practices to attract customer loyalty, because consumers will not be loyal for as long as they are being exploited and the business is busy doing an unethical business practice. Then tax evasion as the last unethical business practice. This focuses on what? Businesses do not declare all their income to SARS. For instance, if you're not doing accounting, there is a financial document that is called an income statement. An income statement will say now income minus all the expenses. But this is a summary. So the income minus all the expenses and the liabilities of the business will then lead to what? The profit. So some businesses would then make, for instance, 1 million as the income. Then expenses would then be, for instance, expenses plus liabilities, let's say they cost 400,000. So the net profit, because we're going to say 1 million minus 400,000, the net profit after tax would then be considered to be what? 600,000. So SARS should then charge the business tax based on the 600,000. So what other businesses do now is that they do not declare all their income to SARS. So their income here is 600,000 after expenses. So they should be charged tax for making 600,000 profit. So some businesses would then say to SARS, or they will then fix or try to falsify their expenses by doing what? By saying, oh no, our expenses were 800,000 instead of 400,000, so that when they go to submit to SARS, SARS will then charge tax based on what? 200,000. Because when you look into saying 800,000 or 1 million minus 800,000, then it means the business made 200,000. And obviously, when we consider the percentage, let's say SARS decides to say 30%. 30% of 600,000 will not be similar to 30% of the 200,000. So this is considered to be tax evasion, because the business will be paying less tax due to the income being considered to be 200,000 and it was falsified, but in actual fact the business shall have generated 600,000. So this is what we call falsifying of the business financial statements, so that the business can do what we call tax evasion. Then let us look into the challenges posed by tax evasion as an unethical business practices. Is that in a case whereby the business is caught that they were doing tax evasion, the business may pay heavy fines for evading tax. And then another one is that tax evasion may negatively impact on the business image, because it will be made public knowledge that so and so business did not pay tax. And then another one is that the accountants may charge high fees for falsifying the financial statements in order for the business to be evading tax. But let us look into the strategies. Some of the mistakes are the idea that VAT needs to be charged on vettable items. So when the business sells, they do not include VAT, which will then make their tax to be more expensive. And then the business should submit the correct tax returns to SARS on time. Then another aspect, all products should be correctly invoiced and recorded, so that the correct vettable item can then be calculated. And then the business should disclose all sources of income for tax payment purposes, so that they avoid doing tax evasion, because it can ruin the image and it can make the business to pay so much of heavy fines. Then let us look into unprofessional business practices. The first one is sexual harassment, then followed by unauthorized use of workplace funds and resources. And then this is to say you'll be using the money of the business or the resource of the business to do things that will not benefit the business. And then also there's abuse of work time. Let us start with the first one. Sexual harassment, for example, can happen when a manager who promises employees promotion if they agree to have a relationship with them, and most of the time it becomes a sexual relationship just for the opportunity for that employee who's eager to be promoted to have the promotion. And normally it happens to female employees, which is then unfair. And then when we are looking into sexual harassment, the challenges posed by sexual harassment as an unprofessional business practice is that they affected party may stay away regularly from work because they will not be happy, they will not be comfortable in that working space, and businesses could lose female employees and attract or retain less female applicants. And then this will have a disadvantage because now remember we have affirmative action, which is under the Employment Equity Act, which talks toward female employees being in the workplace and equality in the workplace. And remember we have a broad-based Black economic empowerment pillar, which we call management what? Control. Management control says to us employees should be in management position. But in a case whereby the business is known for sexual harassment, it then looks into what? It then disadvantages the business to say, why is this business not having management or females in management? It means they are not complying or they are not implicated by the broad-based Black economic empowerment pillar called management control. So this will pose such challenges, but I was just giving you examples. What you do if you get the same question in the exam, you just specify that the business could lose employees or female employees or attract less or fewer female applicants. And then sexual harassment will cause discomfort or humiliation and will negatively affect work relations in the workplace. So that is your consequence of sexual harassment. And then as we proceed, strategies to deal with sexual harassment in the workplace. The business will have to provide for corrective action, meaning corrective measures on what to do should sexual harassment occur in the workplace. And then the business will have to conduct education around employees so that they know what happens and how does it feel now, or how will it affect other workers. Hence we say educate employees on sexual matters or sexual harassment matters, on how it can disadvantage the business. Formulate a policy regarding what? Sexual harassment, so that employees can know what is the punishment should they do sexual harassment. And then also implement internal complaints so that complaints can be taken and noted down, and disciplinary procedures can also be noted and taken down. And then another professional business practice is unauthorized use of workplace funds or resources. For example, employees who download music and movies using the business's resource, they are considered to be doing unauthorized use of workplace funds and resources. And an employee who uses business resources for his or her personal gain is considered as well to be doing unprofessional business practice. That is what we are talking about there. Let us look into the challenge that is posed by this manner, this unprofessional practice, because now this is done by managers, these are done by workers who are in charge for instance, they are in charge of the finances of the business. So fraud will increase the cost of doing business and will undermine the competitiveness of a business. It means the business cannot be competitive as the employees are engaging in fraud. And then another aspect is that it discourages investors, as fraud and corruption will increase the risk of business, and then businesses can experience substantial loss if it goes unchecked. And then another aspect here we need to consider again is that it discourages now investors who want to put more money into the business to increase productivity and maybe potentially create employment for others. And the business will experience substantial loss because even when they are calculating the expenses will increase due to what now? Unauthorized use of workplace funds and resources. For instance, a business was supposed to pay only 1,000 for the Wi-Fi, but now the business can end up paying 2,000 for the Wi-Fi contract because employees are then downloading music and movies in the workplace. And then when you look into another now ways to deal or strategies to deal with unauthorized use of workplace funds and resources in a workplace, the business should conduct regular audits. These are regular checks. Checking the resources, checking the usage, checking whether the transactions that are taking place, if maybe an employee has access to a credit card, are related to the business and they are benefiting the business. And then the business should identify risk areas and vulnerable areas, like for instance, internet access. Make sure that internet will only download work related documents or work related videos or anything that is work related. Educate employees about the impact of fraud, to say it can lead to some of the employees losing their jobs, and implement or introduce fraud prevention strategies to check and ensure that there is no fraud taking place. Then another, or the last unprofessional business practice that can be done by workers. Some workers, for example, can make personal calls during work hours. Some workers can take extended lunch breaks. Some workers will be doing personal business during work hours, and some workers will be using social networks during work hours, and this is considered to be abuse of work time. As we move then into that, what is the challenge posed by abuse of work time? Abuse of work time could result in losing customers and not meeting deadline, because employees will then be losing time as they do their personal issues, and as they play with their phones, and as they log into social media. It will be wasting time, and which will then do what? Cost the business money and affect productivity of the business. And then the abuse of work time results in decline in what now? In profits, which could damage the financial wealth of the business because employees are not productive. So this is the last unprofessional business practice. Now, let us look into the strategies to say those were the challenges. The business can lose its financial wealth, but the business should thereafter deal or come up with these strategies to deal with employees who abuse work time. The managers might speak directly to those who abuse work time. Number 2, monitor employees to ensure that tasks are completed on time. And then another one is to, so those would be the 2 strategies, and I believe you have more on your notes. Then another one is to remind the employees about the idea that profits will decrease, resulting to less incentives or bonus payouts. So that should be clear to the employees, because the employees should be communicated to say you are wasting time, and monitor those employees to check if the tasks are completed on time, and also remind the employees about the profit, and resulting again to less incentives and less bonus because they were abusing time. So now I have an assessment for you. So what I expect from you is to read the scenario below and answer questions that follow. We have trading, enterprise. So the question will instruct you there to identify 2 types of unethical business practices displayed by trading enterprise, and also advise management on how to deal with such. So I'm giving you 5 minutes to complete this one, and then I'll come back with the solutions. Oh, you are not. Are you Welcome back. Let us now go through the question again and then look into the solution. Read the scenario below and answer questions that follow. So trading enterprise charges high prices for goods of inferior quality in remote areas. So trading enterprise also falsifies the financial statements. 1.1.1 says to you now, identify two types of unethical business practices displayed by so trading enterprise. Motivate your answer by quoting from the scenario above. 1.1.2 says it advised the management of so trading enterprise on how they could deal with each type of unethical business practice identified in question 1.1.1. Now, when we look into that, the solutions there, they are very clear. Pricing of goods in rural areas. Why? Because so trading enterprise charges what? High prices for inferior goods in the remote areas. And then it talks to tax evasion because now there's falsifying of business financial what? Statements. So it will be 2 marks for identifying the correct unethical business practice and 1 mark for the motivation. With tax evasion, 2 marks for tax evasion and 1 mark for the motivation as well. So this will then take the mark allocation to C's. So tax evasion because of falsifying financial statements, and these are unethical businesses practices because these are business practices that will then be conducted by a business. A business is the one that will be selling in rural areas, and the business has an obligation to pay tax, so we consider them to be unethical for that particular reason. So ensure that you know what are the keywords when immediately we are talking about inferior goods and the high pricing of those inferior goods. Then we are talking to the pricing of goods in rural areas, and with tax evasion you're going to see with the falsifying of financial statements, or the question will also, the scenario might highlight the issue of SARS being paid and being paid for less. Then as we proceed, strategies to deal with pricing of goods in rural areas. The business should work together with the supplier to share the delivery cost to remote areas or rural areas. And then businesses can buy in bulk to get discounts and avoid charging the high prices. And the businesses by law should charge fair and market-related prices for goods and services. And they should avoid unethical business practices to attract loyalty. And then when you look into tax evasion, the business can ensure that they charge VAT, or VAT needs to be charged on vettable items, and they need to submit the correct tax return to SARS on time, and all products should be correctly invoiced and recorded, and they should also disclose all sources of income tax payment purposefully. So, and then for the tax purpose. Then as we move, then we have another assessment, which is now also checking now a different verb. Remember, a question can say identify, and another question from the scenario can also say now quote. So you should be able to know to say with the quote we are referring to taking the sentence directly from the scenario, but with identifying, you're just going to use what is on the scenario to motivate, nothing else. Then now let me give you another 5 minutes for you to try and solve this one, and then after solving this one we can then also look into corrections and solutions on how to deal with this scenario. So let me give you another 5 minutes and see if you'll be able to interact with these different verbs and your direct questions. Welcome back. Let us now look into solutions relating to this assessment now. 2.1 instructs you to read the scenario below and answer questions that follow. We have Jimmy, Cash, and Kerry here. And then some of the employees of Jimmy, Cash, and Kerry watch movies during office hours while on duty. And the management of Jimmy, Cash, and Kerry underreported their annual profit in the business in order to pay less tax. Now, 2.1.1 instructs you to say, quote 2 unethical or unprofessional business practices from the scenario above. 2.1.2 says, identify the type of unethical or unprofessional business practice for each quoted in question 2.1.1. Then 2.1.3 says, suggest practical ways that Jimmy, Cash, and Kerry could introduce to deal with the type of unethical or unprofessional business practices identified in question 2.1.2. Then 2.2 says, explain how the business can apply transparency and accountability as King Code principles to improve ethical and professional business practices. And then 2.3 differentiates between ethical behavior and professional behavior. Now, let us proceed to the first solution, the scenario now. The two are very clear. Some of the employees of Jimmy, Cash, and Kerry watch movies during office hours while on duty. And the management of Jimmy, Cash, and Kerry underreported their annual profit in the business in order to pay less tax. It's very clear to say one will go to professional and one will go to unethical business practice, because when something or some decisions are taken by management, we consider this to be unethical because it will then lead to the business facing the consequences. But when we look into Jimmy's employees, when we are looking into Jimmy's employees watching a movie, we know that the challenge here has to do with the employees not being professional. So this will be considered to be unprofessional business practices. Then as we proceed, quote 2, the first one is that employees are not watching movies, and the other one is that the management underreported their annual profit. But the follow-up question again is dependent on the scenario, because it says identify the type of unethical or unprofessional business practice for each one that was quoted. We know that the first one is Jimmy. This one will not be given a mark allocation because you obtain the 1 mark for quoting. So the abuse of work time, it is unprofessional, but when we look into the business underreporting their profit, this is unethical, so you get 4 marks for that. So you're just linking the type of unprofessional with the quoted unprofessional business practice from the scenario, and you also match the unethical business practice with the quoted unethical business practice from the scenario. Then you get your 4 marks. Then when you look into suggesting now the practical ways, the question might be phrased in different ways. In this case, they're saying suggest practical ways in which Jimmy, Cash, and Kerry can introduce to deal with. When they are saying introduce, when they're saying new strategies, but you should know that the only strategy is the one that you were taught. Speak directly to those employees who abuse work time. You get your mark. Monitor employees to ensure that the tasks are completed on time. You get your mark as well. So the phrasing doesn't matter, but what you should understand is the main part that you were taught to say dealing with the unethical. You were taught how to deal with unethical, and you should use those strategies and nothing else. And then another aspect is to remind employees that profit will decrease, resulting in less incentives or bonus payouts. So that is how you deal with abuse of work time. Then when you look into now dealing with what? Tax evasion, VAT needs to be charged on vetable items. They need to submit tax returns on time. And another one is all products should be correctly invoiced. And then another aspect is disclosing all sources of income for tax payment purpose. And then when we look into another question now, it says the application of the King Code principles. And remember here, we dealt with this one earlier to say decisions or actions must be clear to all stakeholders, because in a company situation, shareholders would have invested, but shareholders are not there every day to look after their investment. Therefore, the decisions taken by the board of directors, because remember, board of directors are voted for by the shareholders. So shareholders will then vote to say, you are going to run the company on our behalf. So whatever action should be clear to the stakeholders, because shareholders are the most important stakeholders, because they have invested their capital there. Staffing and other processes should be open and transparent, meaning they should be transparent to the stakeholders, again, which might be the employees or the government and the shareholders. Employees and shareholders should be aware of the employment policies of the business. And then another one is to say auditing and other reports should be accurate, meaning the checking of financial statements here, because auditing is the checking of financial statements, and other reports about the company performance should be accurate, meaning the board of directors should not lie, but the information should be accurate and be available to the shareholders. And then regular audits should be done to determine the effectiveness of the business. And then when we look into now accountability, there must be regular communication between management and shareholders, meaning the management of the business and the stakeholders should then have regular communication, because as I said, shareholders are not active in the company. They will not come to the company on a regular basis. Therefore, there should be regular communication so that they know what is actually happening. And then businesses should be accountable and responsible for their decision or actions. And then that is also another aspect to consider there. And then companies should appoint internal and external auditors to audit financial statements, meaning to check. There will be internal auditors who check if the books are correctly recorded, and external auditors will also check if the books were correctly recorded. And then the board should ensure that the company's ethics are effectively implemented to ensure that there's ethical practices within the business. Then when we look into the solution, or the last solution here, which is to differentiate between ethical behavior and professional behavior, the concern there is, again, ethical behavior, it is what is wrong or right in the society, and it will then be focused on how the business is behaving, because the business is selling to the society. And remember, some of the employees are coming from the society and the customers come from the society. So the business should ensure that they behave in ways that the society think is right than any other thing. The business will also have to conform to a set of values that are morally accepted by the society. This is to comply with what are values that are considered to be accepted by the society. And when they develop their code of conduct, they should know that ethics forms part of the code of conduct, and ethics is what is right or wrong in the society. So the code of conduct should form part of ethics to guide now employees to act ethically. And when they are acting ethically, they are acting in line with what the society is thinking is the right thing to do. But professional behavior, on the other side, refers to what is right or wrong in a business. These are set of standards of expected behavior, such as punctuality, such as coming to work on time. So those are considered to be standards of a professional worker. It's what is expected from a professional worker. Hence I say this will then focus on the worker's behavior. And then the business then will also have to ensure that employees apply a code of conduct that was developed by the business in line with what the society is thinking, are good values. So they should behave in line with what the society is thinking are good values. So the business will develop the code of conduct, but the worker now has the responsibility to apply. What is to apply is to use. So the business will then say, workers, use the code of conduct to behave in a professional, or in applying it by using the code of conduct, you are then showing that you are respecting and you are being professional to the business. So these are your solutions, and these are the differences, and then you'll get 2 marks meaning 4 this side, and 2 marks meaning 4 this side, and you get a total of 8. Then summary of our lesson: we looked into the ethical behavior and professional behavior. We then also looked into the application of the 3 king codes: transparency, and we also looked into accountability and looked into responsibility. Remember the structure I had for you. I had top, I had middle, and I also had low. So this is to say, in a company there will be top, middle, and low, and the board of directors. So shareholders are the ones who are the investors to this business. They have invested in the business. So since they have invested in the business, remember, what are they investing? This is capital. I know in a company this will happen in a form of what? Buying of shares. So in that instance, we are saying the shareholders are not active in the business. So there should be transparency in terms of decisions taken. There should be accountability in terms of making sure that there's regular communication between the business and the shareholders. And there should be auditing, and the auditing should be accurate and available to the shareholders, because they are the most important stakeholders of the business. Then we also looked into ways in which professional, responsible, ethical, and effective business practices should be conducted. To say the actions of the business should be responsible for their action, the business should be transparent to their stakeholders, and the mission statement of the business should include values of respect and equality, and they should make sure that they do timeous payment of tax. So those are ways in which the business can be professional, responsible, ethical, and effective in their business practices. And then the last part was to understand the challenges that are posed by unethical business practices, such as unfair advertising, pricing of goods in rural areas, and tax evasion, and also talk about strategies on how to deal with those. And then we also looked into the last part, which will then we looked into how unprofessional business practices such as sexual harassment and unauthorized use of workplace funds and resources can pose a challenge to the business, together with the abuse of work time. So this is our lesson on ethics and professionalism, hoping you understood. And what is key is also uphold the same values. Make sure that you become a good student, become a good learner. Do not abuse your work time or your learning time. Make sure that you do your work on time, because we learned about that. Make sure that you don't harass others in class, and make sure that you do your work on time and you become punctual, because in that you are going to achieve great results. So with that being said, ensure that you become the best, because I believe you are the best, and whatever that might have happened in your previous grades would be mistakes that relate to you growing up to become the teenager and the young adult you are today. So ensure that you work so that you shine later on, and you will be reaping the rewards that you deserve. So thank you for watching this lesson. Keep well. Goodbye.